And welcome everybody. Welcome to this session, the second one of the Oxford-Cambridge Arc that we're covering today. This session will look more closely at productivity, the Economic Prospectus that's recently been published, and the delivery structures underpinning growth. To start with, I'd like to highlight three aspects of this that are pertinent to the creation of sustainable and inclusive communities. Firstly, the commitment to inclusive growth. Secondly, the question of addressing growth as a collective responsibility, responsive growth, if you like. And thirdly, the need for a consistent investment stream to support growth. Just a quick romp through these three aspects. Firstly, inclusive growth. The Economic Prospectus recognises the need for inclusive growth that will support the creation of sustainable communities. Inclusive growth is about everyone having access to opportunities and being able to benefit from the improved prosperity. There is a common purpose here, but are the people, the community living and working in the region aware of the economic vision? Do they recognise the benefits? And are they signed up to growth and the changes that this will involve? Do they believe that they will benefit from the growth if we concentrate on a limited number of innovative-led knowledge sectors rather than a broader focus? Should this be opened up to include some of our established strengths in manufacturing and food processing, hospitality, design and the arts, for example, and with a much broader focus on green technologies? The local industrial strategy recognises this relationship and the vital role that these industries will play now and in the future. But how will this be written into a long-term delivery programme? Secondly, responsible growth. Responsible growth is the idea that somewhere in all of this, the local partners and others have a social responsibility that not only relates to the local economy, but to the wider implications for the environment and the welfare of others. This is something that involves business interests and the community, something that goes beyond the corporate social responsibility mantle and extends to a common and shared responsibility. How do these commitments and wider issues relate to and stem from an economic strategy? There are signs. The prospectus supports the circular economy and presents the ambition for a green arc, and seeks to address climate change and enable us to advance towards the zero carbon arc. This is an ambition that everybody can be part of. People need to be involved in the process, to get engaged, and to be part of a narrative in creating the green arc. How do we go about this? And thirdly, investment. The Economic Prospectus is presenting a case for significant central government investment. At the heart of economic success is a regular and consistent investment stream, and one that will allow the local partners to structure a long-term economic programme. Piecemeal and fragmented funding packages and a stop-go approach need to be avoided. Can a regular and consistent investment stream be achieved? Is this possible? Will the forthcoming comprehensive spending review lead to some clarity on this and allow for a structured delivery pathway to be defined? And something that would allow the local partners to devise a bridging strategy for the local businesses. That's a quick outline of some of the aspects to explore further in our discussions. To sum up, the overarching objective of these lunch hour sessions is about understanding how best to prepare for growth and how we should go about placemaking and developing sustainable communities. A key to this will be a sound and resilient economic strategy and the investment to deliver it. So let's see what our speakers have to say on productivity and an all-inclusive model. I'd like to finish by thanking everybody from both the AOU and the local partners, and particularly the speakers and the chair for their help, and hand over to Andreas to support, to introduce the speakers. Andreas is a director of the Academy of Urbanism and will chair the session. Over to you, Andreas.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you. And I should say that was a little bit longer than the 2 minutes allocated to Stuart's introduction. but we forgive him for that because this event would not have happened without his considerable efforts. So thank you, Stuart. A very warm welcome to all of you. And I place particular emphasis to the word warm, because as from yesterday, I find myself in Cyprus, where the weather at the moment is about 30 degrees. And I'm not going to divert your focus from today's subject by turning the camera outwards to show you the swimming pool that's waiting for me straight after this event. As Stuart has said, this is the second event in our series about the Oxford to Cambridge Arc. The first event focused on, excuse me, on transport. Today's event is about economics, and in particular, the recently published Economic Prospectus. Excuse me. Before I hand you over to our two speakers, I just wanted to make reference to a visit by the Academy to the city of Eindhoven in Holland a few years ago, which was again about economic regeneration. And there I was really very impressed by what the Dutch had done in developing what they called the treble helix, which was their economic model of a partnership between the private sector, local government, and the university, in an effort to regenerate the economy of Eindhoven following the collapse of Philips. Philips was the mainstay of that city, which collapsed in the late 80s. And the Dutch decided that we're going to reinvent ourselves based on our heritage and all the knowledge that we have acquired over the 100 years that Philips had been located there, and to turn ourselves into the Silicon Valley of Europe. Myself, as well as fellow academicians, were very impressed by the visit there and the Dutch efforts to achieve that. And it's therefore with particular interest that I look forward to the two presentations today, where we are doing something very similar along the Oxford to Cambridge arc. And it's particularly interesting to me, and I'm sure to many of you as well, to hear what our two speakers have to say about these plans. The two speakers are Hilary Chipping, who is the CEO of SEMLab, the Southeast Midlands Lab, and Bev Hindle, who is the director of the Oxford to Cambridge Arc Leaders. We start with Hilary. So over to you, Hilary.
Thank you very much. And hopefully my slides will magically appear on the screen. That's great. Thank you very much for the introduction, and also Stuart for setting those really challenging questions for people to think about after we've spoken. So first of all, thank you very much indeed for inviting me here today to talk about the Oxford to Cambridge Arc Economic Prospectus. This is a really exciting time for us. Bev and I and many others have been working very hard over the last few weeks to develop this economic prospectus. It was submitted to the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government at the end of September, and we already have heard that it's been welcomed by a number of government departments. So, first of all, why now, you might be asking? Well, it was suggested by government that it would be really helpful for them to bring together all of the many documents that you will have seen over the last few years, setting out the vision, put it all in one place prior to the government's comprehensive spending review, which we had thought would be happening in October. It now looks as though it will be happening later in the year. But just want to emphasise that this document is it's not just about this spending review. This is for years ahead and fiscal events that will happen in years to come. And so the intention of the document was to set out a high level, but hopefully compelling and evidence-based vision for why should the government invest in this area, and what sort of returns should the government expect, and the private sector as well, from putting their money into the Oxford to Cambridge Arc. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So The Oxford to Cambridge Arc is not a new concept. Many of you will have been talking about it and thinking about it over a number of years. And indeed, in March 2016, when the National Infrastructure Commission was asked to consider, and I quote, how to maximise the potential of the Cambridge, Milton Keynes, Oxford corridor as a single knowledge-intensive cluster that competes on a global stage, protecting the area's high-quality environment and securing the jobs and homes that the area needs. I think that is just as relevant now as it was in 2016. But what's really exciting at this moment is that we have this document that is based on collaboration amongst the universities, local enterprise partnerships, local authorities and others in this area. And in one place, we are setting out our vision. So I believe we're at a pivotal point, and I'm hoping that there are great opportunities for us to work collaboratively moving forwards. But you'll be pleased to know that you are the first audience to really see this prospectus set out today. And then Bev will tell you about the work that's starting on the spatial framework. Next slide, please. So in the document, we set out our ambition to double the gross value added of this area to around £200 billion per year as we move towards 2050. And this growth will be innovation led. And what we're hoping is that this innovation-led growth will help to solve the major economic, environmental, social challenges facing the world, whilst also tackling and delivering against this country's greatest challenges. And at the moment, clearly COVID-19 and developing vaccines, tackling climate change, social inclusion. Stuart's already emphasised the importance of inclusive growth, which is right at the heart of our ambition for the Arc, and also the distribution of wealth around the country. And we will be developing much more detailed business cases to support some of the proposals in the document. But in very broad terms, we would expect every £1 of investment by the government in this area to deliver at least £4 of return. So we think this is a really good proposition, and we hope that government will invest in this area. Next slide, please. So the vision of the Arc is very clear. We want to be a global hub for innovation. We want to be home to exemplary models of green development, and we want to inspire communities around the world. We want to be at the forefront of adopting new technology and innovative solutions that will enable green inclusive development. And we believe that in the Arc, we have a unique ability to bring together, to cross-fertilise ideas from different sectors, such as the creative sector, life sciences, space, aviation, from different institutions. So we've got 10 universities across the Arc, and bringing together the expertise and people at the real forefront of particular areas of research, bringing them together in a collaborative way. We believe that we can help to tackle some of these really challenging problems. And we also have our private sector companies in this area, which are known for their entrepreneurialism, and the real at the heart of the Arc will be this idea of actually commercialising the ideas that come out of that collaborative research. So next slide, please. And indeed, in this area, we are fortunate to have the highest density of research and development institutions relative to any other region of the UK. We've got 10 universities. Oxford and Cambridge are clearly the best known worldwide, but we have fantastic universities such as Cranfield with its global research airport, and many others. We've also got a great tradition in this area of actually solving problems and challenges that are really important to the world. If you think about Bletchley Park, the home of the code breakers, that was positioned in Bletchley because it was between Oxford and Oxford and Cambridge universities. And at that stage, we did have a railway line, the Varsity line, that joined up those two institutions. And because of that, bringing those minds together, we were able to solve the code breaking challenges of the Second World War. And indeed, we were at the forefront of computing with the first electronic computer, Colossus, developed at Bletchley Park. So we've got that history. We're demonstrating at the moment that we can rise to the challenge of COVID, with vaccines being developed in Oxford at the start of the pandemic, when there was a call from government for more ventilators, more personal protective equipment. In this area, the Formula One teams focused around Silverstone rose to that challenge, and immediately we were able to show how resilient we are and how we can move quickly, and that we can actually commercialize and manufacture new ideas very quickly. So that's what we could do in the past, in the present. We believe that this document sets out the opportunities that are in the future for building on that. Next slide, please. So this slide's quite a busy one, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, but really it sets out with a bit more detail some of the facts about what I've just been talking about. So the institutions, for example, we've got the Jenner Institute in Oxford that's at the heart of the vaccine trials. We're at the hub of developing connected autonomous vehicle technologies. That's the Culham Science Centre of Excellence in Oxford. We've got the Cranfield Global Research Airport, and we've got the Space Cluster at Harwell in Oxfordshire, and also coming into Westcott, and Motorsport Valley. And I've already mentioned the potential for that cluster of high performance engineering, high tech businesses around Silverstone. So we can demonstrate that we have this great history and tradition to build upon as we move forwards. Next slide, please. And there are a lot of challenges at the moment. Clearly, COVID-19 is at the heart of most of our thinking at the moment, and as local enterprise partnerships, we're doing a lot of work around developing an economic recovery strategy and working very closely with our local authority colleagues around that. But looking forward to the end of the EU transition period, this country will need to build a different relationship around the world. And we believe that some of the work that is being carried out in the Arc, and our ambition to be carbon neutral, can help to develop innovative high-tech solutions that will enable us not just to grow the economy in a sustainable way in this area, but to provide jobs across the rest of the UK, and really to lead the world in terms of our groundbreaking innovation and technology. This needs to be inclusive growth, and we need to take heed of the government's desire to level up or redistribute wealth around the country. Next slide, please. So within the prospectus, we've set out a number of key asks of government, and these are themes, some of which are fairly well developed, others of which we're moving forward and progressing them at this moment. So the key innovation themes are focused on life sciences, where we want to, working across our universities group, and with the LEPs as well, we want to facilitate increased opportunities for greater collaboration around life sciences, and really build on those commercialisation opportunities. Sustainable aviation, and I think this is really exciting, because clearly the aviation sector is going through a difficult time at the moment, but looking to the future, if we can develop net zero aviation, and the start of that is linking up the fantastic work that's already going on in Cambridge. We have the Whittle Laboratory looking at the forefront of aerospace propulsion. Over in Oxford, we've got the Thermofluid Institute looking at heat transfer, and we've also got a large number of spin-out companies looking at electric motors, battery development, renewable energy sources such as hydrogen. Bring all of that together and you have an absolutely fantastic way of solving some of the really, really difficult problems that we're facing, so that in the future we can benefit from from aviation and the benefits of travelling around the world without having to consider the damaging effect on the environment.
1 minute, Hilary, 1 minute.
Thank you. Yes, nearly. That's fine. Thank you. So those are the opportunities around innovation. So if you move on to the next slide, it's just a couple more slides. So actually picking up on one of Stuart's points at the beginning, and that is that, yes, this is innovation-led growth, but clearly in order to enable that growth, we need to ensure that we've got the right sort of infrastructure. And we mean that in the broadest sense. We need to provide support for our businesses. We need to make sure that we've got the right sort of skills in our local communities. We need to build on connectivity in a sustainable way. So hopefully East-West Rail will be great if it could be an electrified rail link between Oxford and Cambridge. And it's really important, and I'm sure this is absolutely vital and understood well by this group, that places are important, and we need to look at new ways of living and working, and that's already starting to happen as a result of working from home. And the environment, you know, we talk about the Green Arc, we've already got some great ideas for doubling the amount of land accessible to people of managed natural land. So just the last slide now, please. Just to sum up, so this is what we mean by creating a new economy, a global innovation hub with transformative economic potential. So we believe that this can be the Green Arc, where we demonstrate that net zero carbon and environmental net gain can go hand in hand with economic growth in a way which not only benefits our own communities and future communities in this area, but also has the potential to benefit the whole of the UK and the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. That very, very ambitious program indeed. And we look forward to what Bev has to say now, and in terms of the growth boards and the governance and how this program can be taken forward. So Bev, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andres, and thank you very much for, well, excellent presentation, Hilary. You're going to steal lots of my thunder, but that's good because that shows how joined up we are, which is excellent. I think it's really important that we understand the context that we're working in here, and I think what I will come on to in the bit of my presentation is this idea of a spatial framework. Is that, and I had this conversation in a webinar a couple of weeks ago. Well, it was a bit of a challenging conversation with somebody, really, which is they were challenging whether the Arc was a place or not. And I think at the end of the day, it's not a place. This is a construct. It's a concept of many, many places and of many, many people, of many, many systems. And I think one of the reasons why we need a framework and we need something that starts to bring us together is to be able to create that consistent messaging and identity. And Stuart, you gave some really great challenges at the front. I'll try and pick up a few of those as I go through. Next slide, please. I won't spend much time on this because I think many of you in this group will have heard our chair present this to you back in August, Councillor Barry Wood, but it does bear repeating because it has been updated. Really, we are organized as a coalition of the willing, as I'm sure Barry would have mentioned to you. He mentions to me often. This is not a statutory body. This is not a formal body. It's not a statutory committee. It is a group of leaders and chairs working collaboratively together for what they feel is common good, and to agree what they agree, and whatever's outside of that spectrum is not for them to deal with. And it's also a place where we try to work closely with and collaboratively with government. And we have a structure that, as the slide says, we've got a plenary of all of our partners and chairs and leaders. We have an executive, a smaller group of that representation across the three growth boards that are included in that. And there's a trick in the name there. I said three, and I'll come on to that in a second. Along with the local enterprise partnerships, and indeed there is an open chair on that executive, but not yet occupied by the health bodies across the Arc as well. And we're very keen to get them involved in the work we're doing as well. That's underpinned and supported by an operations group through the chief executive group, and some work streams that are along the bottom there. I did say three, we were four. I just want to make sure it's absolutely clear. Buckinghamshire Council have decided that they do not want to be part of the Arc Leadership Group any longer, nor does the Bucks LEP. We'll continue to keep open doors to be able to work with them across boundaries as much as we can, but they're not part of that group. So just to be clear on that. And I think I understand right, to get it right, Buckingham University are not part of the Arc Universities group either. However, I am pleased to say, because it's very important, that the landscape and the geography and the places of Buckinghamshire are still very much covered by the definition of the Arc for the government, which is why we still are working to make sure that at least those networks and those joined up pieces of work that need to cross over that geography are still being articulated. But just to be clear, they are not part of the Arc group going forward. Next slide, please. So why do we get together? Why are we doing this? And Stuart, there's a real challenge for us, and we're not there yet. We're not even close to that yet, where we have not really landed the concept of what the Arc is, why it is, and what it's really trying to establish. And I think part of that is because we've been constantly waiting. We would say, as a collective group, we've been waiting for government to be really clear about what their intention is here. I think we've started to identify that clarity through the prospectus and through some of our relationship building with government, but we haven't landed that down into our communities yet. And that's a real challenge for us going forward. But the things I've listed on here, I won't read them all out, but these are the reasons why we come together. We are trying to support the economy. It is an economically significant region as defined by government. However, we think that, you know, economy is part of a three pillars of sustainability, really, and that places, people are very important to that conversation, very important to our ability to deliver the economy. So our place leaders are very much front and center in this conversation, wanting to influence and wanting to drive a better outcome for residents now and in the future. And it wouldn't be local government, it wouldn't be LEPs, and it wouldn't be universities if we weren't also looking for funding and long-term security through investment channels. Stuart, it is the holy grail which we continue to seek and have yet to see, but we are very keen to work with government. They have been very keen to listen to us ask for the establishment of very clear investment channels, consistent, confident investment channels, so that we have the confidence to be able to bid against those. Anybody up and down the country, it's not unique to our part of the world. The amount of revenue money that you have in local organizations right now to speculate on getting government funding is very limited. And we need that surety to be able to have the confidence to invest and really deliver delivery programs going forward. So we're doing pretty good on the ideas, we're doing pretty good on the concepts, but we really now need to focus on investment and delivery. I think that's really fundamental to us. Next slide, please. I think, yes, I just wanted to cover off what we're currently working on, just to make sure that it's clear. I mean, the prospectus is front and center right now, and Hillary's done an excellent job of summarizing that too. And you know, look, I understand we get these, it's a fantastic virtual coffee table book, a brochure. Would welcome it on my virtual table at any time. But I really do encourage you to read it, because while it is called and branded an economic prospectus, it's very important that people see that we are going deeper and broader than that, and into those place shaping issues, into those inclusivity issues, because they are fundamental to the people who are around this group, and including government. Government are very keen. Look, they understand the productivity challenge. If you're going to drive a doubling of GVA growth from 100 billion to 200 billion, there is a productivity leveling up within the region that has to take place. And I, whether it's in this forum or others, we've been very clear that, look, in terms of inclusivity, we have populations within our area that are unable to afford to live here. You know, the 15 times what it would, you know, for in terms of what their salaries are to affordability. We have people on one side of Oxford or one side of Bedford and the other who live 15 years longer than others. And these are unacceptable inequalities that need to be addressed. And we feel through the economic prospectus and our economic pitch, our innovation and our research and development strengths, we should be able to guide some of those and direct some of those inequalities to be, the gaps to be closed. So the things that we're working on include the recovery strategy, include the prospectus, building up now. We've said this in the prospectus. What does the actual detail of that look like? This concept of the green arc, which Hillary outlined, we've been very fortunate to get pilot funding from government to work on local natural capital. Some really exciting mapping in that. I really encourage you to follow up on that work. It's really interesting as somebody who's done local planning and strategic planning before. the level of detail of mapping we're getting to is going to be able to allow us to really get down to that granular level to test and measure whether we are actually getting net gain, net zero, doubling of capital. This is a very important layer that we're going to require for our plans going forward. I'll talk about the spatial framework in a moment. And of course, that thing that I've been talking about right throughout this, this engagement activity that we need to now increase. And on that, we do very much hope to have a session of our own in about a month's time to sort of go through the prospectus in more detail, but also wherever we can to link into groups like this to be able to spread the message as much as we can and get the word out there. Next slide, please. Busy slide, I won't repeat it. I mean, Hillary already covered off this, but when you have a moment to read through this, I think what's really important here is I think it's very important that you've got a region that, while it is economically driven, it is innovation and education known across the planet. We are really getting down into quality of life issues here. We are really getting down into clean green growth, the kind of issues that Hillary talked about, that we think we've got a really strong offer, not just to address, but to create solutions and marketable solutions for as well. So I think this vision is actually quite important to us going forward. Next slide, please. This idea of a green arc, I just throw this quote up here. This is from Peter Horrocks, CBE, from a member of our group. Hillary knows very, very well, works within the SEMLEP grouping. But I think it's really fascinating that this idea of being able to apply this sort of title of green arc, which can mean everything and nothing if you're not careful. But I think what our challenge is, by throwing these definitions out there, there's a real opportunity for us to actually cut into some really innovative thinking, and particularly with this integration of green spaces and green thinking into our own well-being as communities, the environment, and for the economy, quite frankly. And of course, those are all part of what we are trying to push across our approach to sustainable development. And I think these concepts and writing them down is very important, because once you've written them down, you really need to follow up and do more work on that. And that's exactly where we are right now. And we have the commitment to continue to go on that journey. And I'm really pleased about that. So it's not, as I say, just an economic recovery strategy or just about the money. It is far deeper and far more important in terms of our communities going forward. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what is our collective ambition? To summarize where Hillary was right, of course we want to unlock investment, that's part of it, but it's not just government investment, it's not just public funding. In fact, there's a significant amount of private funding that has been blocked up waiting to do work in the ARC. The challenges from yourselves and other organizations, can you get on with it, please? Because they want to be able to invest in some of these ideas. That's one of our major drivers. Driving that economic growth, we've talked quite a bit about promoting this world-class research and innovation. We had a slightly different take to Eindhoven. I think it's really important. This idea in the ARC, and I don't say it's unique to us, but it's pretty a strong story, I think, where we actually come up with the ideas in the first place. We can test through living labs their application and how to develop those. We can actually then produce them and use them and apply them to our own communities here. And then we can actually export those around the planet. That's a fantastic life cycle, I think, of development that we think has unending potential, really, in terms of where the ARC and UK PLC could take us going forward. And of course, as I say, or as Hillary said, transforming our approach to building and delivering sustainable communities. Without our communities, without our places underpinning that, you saw the map, we are a polycentric region. We need to bring these places and develop these places along with us in a positive way. This isn't just about 1 million homes anymore. We've very much moved on from that narrative, although some, I'm afraid, are still stuck on it. This is really about the quality of places and spaces going forward. Next slide, please. There's a few busy slides here. If it's okay, I'm going to skip on because there's a lot of, if you want to take these away and look at them, it gives you a bit of the story and the history of how the ARC has landed where it is. I won't go through them in detail, but it does tell a little bit of a story if you're not used to the
2 minutes, Bev.
Thank you, Andreas. Next slide, please. And one after that. Good. And now the next slide. So in your leisure, read those through. It's just a really bit of a potted history. So where are we going? And that potted history guides you to where the government has decided not just to declare this an area of national economic significance, but also that they want to do something called an Arc Spatial Framework for them. And what is that? Well, I kind of had hoped by now I'd be able to give you the definitive slide, but it's not quite there yet from the government's perspective. They are preparing it. They are coming out. They're slowly starting to talk to local authorities and partners about what it might be. But it is in theory non-statutory, but it does have national policy status is what they're looking at the moment. What form of that status, what it might take, that's still something they're determining. But that is quite significant because there's a huge gap you'll have noticed in the white paper and other the MPPF around strategic planning. And I think they feel this could be some sort of exemplar or a way of being able to fill that gap. So I watch that space. It is to set out that overall ambition. We put a vision in front of them, but one that will actually drive a spatial distribution, a spatial growth strategy. We believe it has absolutely has to be underpinned by sustainability, and that would be fundamental to it. But also this idea of a very robust monitoring framework. For those of you planners in the room, we've kind of got away from measuring plans. We've kind of got away from measuring whether we're on target or not. But if we're going to establish new kind of outcomes, then we have to make sure we're measuring that to make sure we're on track to delivering that. And we think it's going to take about 24 to 36 months to be able to complete. Next slide. I think we're just about there. Thank you. Just to sum up, Stuart, one last thing I just want to pick up from your, we can pick them up in questions, but one of the things that we've not done enough on yet, and one of the things that we want to do more work, and I think the spatial framework will be able to do that, through engagement with communities, through engagement with groups like yourselves, that placemaking agenda can start to come to life. And we all can say the good principles, we can all talk about what we'd like to see happen, but I think it'll give us an opportunity to actually move that forward in a very positive, proactive, and collaborative way. And I would certainly encourage everybody in this room, virtual room, to take part in that as it comes forward. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bev. Thank you so much. Clearly, as both you and Hilary have illustrated, a very, very ambitious program. Still a lot of work to do. I understand that. I'm going to take the chair's prerogative and ask the first question, which is really about the timeline. And I think the timeline of 2050 is what I've seen before as well, and we saw it from your presentation today as well. I just want to understand a little bit more about the intermediate stages and whether you have set yourselves as a body any milestones that you need to achieve in terms of either planning status or delivery of essential infrastructure.
Hilary, I'll have a first go if that's okay. And then I think the short answer is, Andreas, no. We believe that there's this 3-year sort of window right now. The government's very much thinking within their own parliament time right now. So I think we have basically a job to do over the next 24 to 36 months to actually build this identity. What is it going to be? Is the government going to create an establishment? Is it going to create some sort of identity for the Arc, which is a place or a set of people who are going to respond to the Arc? I think as that starts to develop, then the products start to flow. And in the meantime, we will develop the spatial framework over that same time period. And I believe we will take the next step with the prospectus and start to build detailed business cases off the back of that. So I think the immediate milestone is really 6 months to 36 months. We really need the CSR to establish the pathway for that. As Hilary said, this wasn't a bidding document specifically for money. This was a document saying you need to clear the pathway and the channels so that we can then bid for money. So I think the immediate milestones are 12 months to 36 months. Hilary, I don't know if you've got a different view on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine, Bev.
That's in fact, you mentioned the key word there, Bev, which is your immediate objective is to build this identity. And it goes back to what you said earlier on about the spatial vision. And I think there is a question from Pam Alexander here, which I would like to invite. Pam, if you wouldn't mind asking your question, please, about the spatial vision and whether this is a space, a place, a region. What is it? Is Pam there?
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute, start my video and look at the chat all at once. Hi, everybody. And thank you for 2 really, really interesting presentations. It's a very exciting vision. My question, and you'll all know where I'm coming from on this, is you said it wasn't a place, but it really is a region. And I'm wondering, is that a positive nowadays? Have we got beyond the R word being unmentionable? And if I may, Andreas, I was just about to ask a less obviously me question, which was, given the new white paper proposals, if you're zoned as a growth area for substantial amounts of this, how will you get the community interested, engaging in the top-down strategy and local plans if they're then excluded from individual planning decisions because they have outline planning automatically? I can see there may be some issues between you and the local planning authorities as well, depending on what powers you get.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Pam. well, Hilary, do you want to start and I'll come in off the back of that?
I'll talk about the R word, and then I'll leave you, Bev, to pick up on the, on the detailed planning. And good to see you, Pam. And absolutely, we weren't allowed to say region for so many years, and now it is sort of gradually creeping back in. But I think, and certainly from the formation of local enterprise partnerships is very much about, does this work as an area? It's a functional economic area. As Bev said, we're polycentric. We need to find a way of bringing together all of our towns and cities and institutions. So I call it an area because I still feel that region isn't, we're not quite there yet. But I think what is really important is that we've asked government to recognise this area. So when they're, rather than being pulled in many different directions, which you'll be very familiar with, when we had 3 of the former regions that all had a slice of this arc, it'll really be much easier to make the sort of progress that we've set out if government can recognise this area and this single entity or identity.
Pam,
okay, thank you.
Sorry, Andreas, is that okay? I'll just quickly on the second part. I think it's very simplest form. The value is, look, let's state the obvious. There is a value of the brand of Oxford and Cambridge working collaboratively, but what the world doesn't probably understand is the amazing story that happens in between and around that. And I think there's an opportunity to create a narrative that does bind us together as a region, as a set of places. And I think that story, it needs to be told. And I get the opportunity to hear the literally unbelievable stories of where we've been and where we could go. So I think there's a really strong story there. As for the white paper, I think what I can't say I've won this argument yet, but I've at least started the argument, which is, look, whether you're a local planning authority really worried about housing numbers or this new approach where government's going to tell you how many houses to get, I've always worked on the principle that your best defense is to be proactive. And in this particular case, if you can take things like the natural capital mapping and you can start to draw out these community strengths and weaknesses, and you can start to look at the layering up of information and build scenarios through some excellent work people like Professor Jim Hall are doing at ITRC, you could actually start to have a conversation back to government about where and what should happen around zoning, for example, way before you ever get to some sort of overarching zone which says this is a growth area. Look, 9%, only 9% of this area roughly is urban. The rest of it is part of that major important countryside that actually determines part of our quality of life. That would not be clever to simply think about paving over that. So I think to engage government with evidence, with proper community engagement, will allow not a pushback, but a collaborative product that comes out and integrates those places into the strong economic story, rather than somehow putting it, as if it's some sort of combative to that. So I think being engaged, working with this process will be to their benefit. Not doing so, I think, is a disbenefit, because then you're simply waiting and reacting. And I certainly would not encourage that. I don't think that's the right approach at all for something this positive.
Thank you, Bev. I'm going to stay with this particular point because there was another question about the relationship with the local communities and local decision making from Tobias. Tobias, would you like to ask your question, please?
Hello, yes, thank you. And it is the same sort of topic, really. How will this framework, which we've said that is not a statutory framework, we assume it probably hasn't got any weight for local planning decisions, for example, but how, what approach or what tools will there be, or what are you thinking to engage with local communities? It's not going to be in neighborhood plans. So how are we going to connect with community groups, with people in those cities and towns in the Arc to really bring this vision alive? It's all good to be there in a nice glossy pamphlet, but if people don't know about it or live it or can contribute to it, it's not really worth much, I think. So how are we going to get it out?
That's a really good question. Really good question through your chair. I think a couple of points that I'd like to make. One is I am speculating at the moment because I haven't seen government's blueprint to what they're going to do in the spatial framework, but we did a lot of work towards the end of last year to tell government what we'd like to see in that framework. And I can say that a major underpinning of what we're asking government to do is a major collaboration effort with everybody that's involved and interested in working across the Arc. And that will include neighbors beyond the Arc. I mean, this is another false boundary. The reality is we have relationships well beyond the current setup of the Arc. So I think that has to be an underpinning part. The second part is just to, well, not correct you, Tobias, because I don't know for sure, but I actually do believe this is going to have weight. So it won't be statutory like part of the plan system, but if it's national policy, then local plans will have to take cognizance of it. So I think it's going to be important. I think it's going to be a requirement for local authorities and communities to engage with that process, because it will in fact actually have an impact. And that's one of the reasons why the leadership group formed itself, possibly in a defensive posture, I have to say, but be able to influence that document coming forward on behalf of its communities. But then if that's right, then I think it's incumbent on us as those local partners to engage our communities in that process. So we become a very important part of this two-way flow of information from government to our communities, but also from our communities back up to government. And I think the work I know that the ARC team inside government are doing right now is to, how can they build a digital model that can create a much better digital engagement with our communities, can access populations we don't typically access. How can we engage our local partners in a way that we can bring this to the table as a positive? And I know they've employed somebody just recently, I think we heard today, Hillary, to actually help design that engagement process to be able to get that kind of depth of involvement. Because I agree with you, Tobias, if we're unable to reach communities with this, then I don't think it'll just be, they won't care. I think it'll become actually a problem, because they will simply hear the messages they want to hear. I agree with you.
Hillary, do you want to add anything to that, or shall I go to the next question?
Very briefly, I'd like to emphasise that it's important to engage with our local businesses. So it's not just local community. And that's going to be really important to deliver that economic vision. Yeah,
thank you. A slightly different question, which tries to, from, I think the name is Ioanna, it tries to relate planning with health. So Ioanna, would you like to ask your question, please?
Hello, everyone. It's Ioanna. I'm a research officer. I work in the third sector. So my question comes from a slightly different perspective, in the sense that the health sector has become more interested in addressing the economic crisis, for example. So NHS has an explicit plan to address poverty, for example. Public Health England is developing an inclusive economic framework. So I was wondering whether you are trying to tie into this work. Is it in that sense that you tied in with health bodies, or is it more economic growth in the sense of growing the health and social care sector, perhaps?
Okay, so who's going to take? Yeah.
So I actually, yes and yes. So I think in the first instance, we really want the health bodies to engage in this in a strategic sense, because we think health is so fundamental, particularly as an infrastructure, but also as a vital part of our offer. In fact, if you look at our innovation offer and around life sciences, et cetera, it's a big part of what we're actually starting to talk about. So I think health is there not just as a preventative, reactive thing to, in terms of we need more hospitals or we need more facilities, et cetera. And in fact, the conversation is now moving to digital connectivity and can we get enough resilience in our communities to be able to have more closer to home care. But also it's talking about how health can integrate with that positive economic message, which is around using that innovation, using that model, which starts to move into more individual and personal healthcare. And there's a third one that you maybe didn't mention or I missed, which is, and we also think the health sector, particularly public health, is absolutely spot on message in terms of well-being, and where we want to put well-being at the core of what we're trying to do around an inclusive economy and inclusive sort of placemaking. And we think health partners, particularly public health, are absolutely the ones we need at the table. That's why we've created the chair on the executive for them when they're ready to come to that. And we continue to push for them to come to that. That would be helpful. The only thing I'll add is, unfortunately, despite our asking, the department hasn't come to the ARC table. There is a small set of ministries who are front and center in the ARC inside government. And unfortunately, health's not in that inner circle yet. And we continue to push for that going forward. Hillary, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
on the question of health, I cannot help but relate the following anecdote from another academy visit to another Dutch town, this time Utrecht. I think it was last year we were there. And I asked the planning director of Utrecht, what is the one objective that you as planning director of this city have, in one word? And whereas if I had asked the same question of any director of any council in England, they would have probably said housing or transport or, you know, financial regeneration. This gentleman said health. My one objective is the citizens' health and well-being. That's where we hang everything else, whether it's an environmental policy or a transport policy or economics. We start with asking ourselves the question, will this improve the citizens' health? And I think it's so important.
Fantastic. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Okay. One question that came through, and we had to answer it actually last time as well when you were dealing with the art. You both mentioned it. It's about the rebalancing, the national rebalancing, and the leveling up that the government is promoting. A lot of people see that you know, if there is this focus and concentration of energy and money and in one region, as opposed to the north of the country, that's not rebalancing the economy. How would you respond to that accusation, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps I could start.
Yeah.
And I did try to bring that out a little bit in our presentation.
Yes,
we're very much aware of that.
Of these comments, yeah.
Absolutely. So really, we want to demonstrate that because of what we're good at in this area, the innovation, the commercialization, that we can bring that that opportunity to distribute wealth and to create jobs in other parts of the country. You know, simple examples around connected autonomous vehicles, research into different sustainable fuels. Manufacturing can take place you know, in Derby in the northeast. We've got the space sector here, could bring jobs to Cornwall. So what we're trying to say quite simply is government investment will deliver a big return, at least, you know, 4 to 1 is what we're saying, and we hope that in some cases it will be a lot higher than that. And the opportunities in terms of more jobs are likely to be across the whole of the UK. And then also we want to really point out the opportunities for operating on a global scale and taking some of that innovation, particularly around the practicalities of delivering a green recovery. That's something that will then put us in a strong position in terms of a global market.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Bev, did you want to add anything, or we've got a couple of minutes for the last question,
No,
which is
question. Thank you.
Okay. The next question is about I think you both mentioned it, place making and shaping investments. How are you going to go up? How are you going to achieve the best possible placemaking for this new huge area that that you're considering?
Well, one of the things I didn't mention, I mentioned it, but only in passing. And I think Stuart was trying to tease this out of the presentation. Actually, the structure of which we work is quite mixed. It's not as defined perhaps as it could be, but we have 3 growth boards, which basically are agglomerations of local partners, and I mean local partners. So it's the local enterprise partnerships, the universities, in some cases the health sectors, etc., where actually placemaking becomes their job as part of this overarching ARC sort of manifesto, if you like, or this vision for the ARC. Really, you're starting to talk about the delivery bodies coming through the growth boards and the local authorities and the local partnerships. Indeed, in some cases, those networks are already existing. In other cases, they need to be built. So I think the ARC provides that sort of superstructure or that vision over top, but the actual delivery bodies are much more locally based. And I think in that respect, if we can get, and it will be it'll take some doing to be able to get a common vision across that many players. But I think the strength of having a common vision is that then that local interpretation of that vision can really start to bite hold, because the reality is they are very different places. You know, Oxford and Cambridge are, despite what people think, are not really alike in a lot of ways, and they shouldn't have to be, and nor should the villages and towns in between. So I think there's a real opportunity here to use the brand, to use the recognition, and hopefully those dedicated investment channels to be able to actually help those delivery bodies locally to be able to really make a difference.
Thank you, Bev. Thank you. I think I'm going to leave it there. It's been a fascinating 1 hour. Thank you to both Hilary and Bev for fantastic presentations, really interesting. I'm jealous of you. You've got such a challenge ahead of you, and it must be invigorating to be part of it. So thank you for taking the time to be with us during this time. And before I say goodbye, can I also thank again Stuart for putting this together. I would also like to thank the support team back at the Academy, Linda, Olga, and Delano. And now that we are all beginning to be faced with this dreaded lockdown looming ahead, can I wish you all a safe weekend. And thank you for being with us.